So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Sandi and Rajon, and they're going to be, so Sandi and Rajon run the engineering university at LinkedIn, which is focused on technical folks there. And they forever had the engineering bootcamp, but as Shelter in Place moved in, they moved the entire experience to remote first in only a handful of days. So they're going to tell us their story. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to them.
Cool, thanks so much, Marco. Just give us a second as we share our screen.
There you go, you should be there.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you for turning on the captioning for everyone. So want to appreciate everyone for taking some time to listen to our story about how we started our remote first journey in technical training at LinkedIn. So let's get started. I just want to quickly introduce who we are. So Sandi, can you move on to the next slide? I just want to introduce who we are. So we're the technical training team at LinkedIn. We are responsible for training all of engineering. Right now, we are around 6,500 engineers globally at LinkedIn. Our team is responsible for technical onboarding, such as engineering bootcamp. So that is our 4-day bi-weekly class delivered both in headquarters here in the Bay Area, as well as in India. So normally we onboard about 1,200 engineers per year globally. In addition to engineering bootcamp, we also deliver 35 different types of ILT classes, depending on different types of technical topics and concepts. So we have about 2,500 engineers attend those classes per year. We also are responsible for Tech Talks, our way of sharing technical knowledge and insights from our engineers, which have, we have a tremendous audience for that. And we're also responsible for self-paced online learning. So we have about 32 programs right now online, all hosted within our version of LinkedIn Learning, so that engineers can learn at their own pace. So we have almost 3,000 engineers that engage with our online training annually. So let's move on to the next slide. So just want to start off with some context. So on March 3rd, it was a normal day. I ran into our VP of engineering in the hallway, and he gave me a heads up saying, hey, something might happen next week, and your team should think about delivering engineering bootcamp remotely in case anything happens. Later on that evening, we received an email from our head of HR saying that that work from home will be required starting March 9th, which is the following Monday. The next day, first thing the team did is that we initiated what we called a training GCN. So for folks outside of LinkedIn, a GCN stands for Global Change Notification. It's our way of alerting everyone that there's a site outage and that engineers should drop what they're doing to make sure this is resolved as soon as possible. So this is the training version of that. This is our site outage. So we had to move quickly and resolve things quickly so that we can deliver our technical onboarding the following week with no interruptions and make sure that our engineers can get trained. So moving on to the next slide. So what we needed to do was assess the situation. We had to identify all of our constraints, knowing that HR and IT are critical to onboarding. We had to make sure that our communications were very close with both HR and IT, and made sure that we identify the things that we already know and things that we don't know. So these are things like, will start dates be affected? How will new hire orientation change? So luckily, start dates weren't affected, and new hire orientation the following week, which is usually one day, HR decided to deliver it in small chunks across the entire week. So that kind of affected the way that our, how we thought bootcamp will be handled. When speaking with IT, we learned that yes, laptops will be sent to the new hires starting on Monday. However, they won't receive them until Monday or Tuesday, which means they'll need to work closely with new hires to make sure that they're set up, configured, and they have all the software that they need. And so, unfortunately, our new hires joining that following Monday won't be ready for productivity until the end of the week. So we had to think of decisions of how to do this correctly. And to tell you all about how we implemented this remote engineering bootcamp based on these constraints and information, I'm going to turn it over to my team member, Sandi.
Great, thank you. So like Rajon was mentioning, that the boot camp is actually run for onboarding, and we actually run it twice a month. So for some people, it is their first week of employment, and for some people, it's their second week of employment. So for those people that it was first week, based on the logistics with IT and the equipment and the orientation changes, we just were not able to get those first week people into the boot camp. So we kept the people that were already registered, which was basically all of our second week people, and delayed the first week people for to the next boot camp so that they would have time to get everything organized. But we had to make sure that we aligned all this with the hiring managers, and based on the productivity expectations, because of the delays in the IT equipment, it made it easy for us to align with the hiring managers, because they weren't going to have their equipment, it wasn't going to be set up, it wasn't going to be ready. So once we figured out the basic pieces of this, of just can we get people into the class, then we had to decide how are we going to actually deliver this. This is a 4-day in-person training class that has things like presentations and product demos and guest speakers and hands-on activities. So how are we going to be able to take this information and convert it into something that could be remotely delivered? So our first task was finding a tool that we could actually use. In our world, we have access to BlueJeans, Zoom, and Teams. All of them have the ability to do virtual type of experience, but we wanted to make sure that it could accommodate the number of people. So our boot camps are normally 50 to 60 people, so we had to make sure it could accommodate that. We need to make sure that it was going to be easily set up, and that we would have features to be able to engage the users with. So these features are things like doing Q&A and being able to do polling and things like that. And that we had the ability to reduce noise, because I know all of you guys are well aware it is difficult to get people to remember to mute themselves, especially after they've been talking, or they forget, or they didn't even realize they weren't muted. So that can be very distracting. So we decided to switch from a regular virtual room or a virtual meeting to doing more of an event style meeting. So we picked BlueJeans event for our first, to running this basically remotely. And we picked an event option because you have the control and event options to be able to, mute everybody and be able to, have the options to do the chats and the Q&As and things like that. So it gave us advantages in that manner. It does have a couple of disadvantages in that the people cannot actually see each other. And it's difficult to give them the rights to actually speak if they wanted to verbally ask a question. They have to raise their hand, and somebody has to give them permission, and then they have to turn it on. So there were some trade-offs in this, but we decided that it was well worth being able to have the added features of the Q&A, which gives us a threaded Q&A option, as well as the open chat, and then the polling features to have engagement, and it can handle the large capacity very easily. So once we looked at what type of tool we were going to use, then it was, okay, what other things do we have to look at? Our content. This is an instructor-led class. Can it be converted into a remote environment? What are the things we need to look at? We have labs and exercises in this content. Can those labs be done remotely? Can people access all the resources that are needed for those labs? And can they do these labs in a more self-paced manner where they're just, asking questions along the way, as opposed to an instructor leading them through a lab? will our guest speakers and mentors be comfortable coming on, and how disruptive will it be for them, for us to switch between the main presenter and the guest speakers and the mentors, and will they be able to have their machine set up, you know, what kind of stuff was going on with that. And then, will our attendees have the right equipment, have their equipment set up? Can they access all the things that they're going to need to access as you're going through all these pieces? And so, you know, we looked at our material and we did figure out there was a couple of exercises or a couple pieces that weren't going to really work well. So we had to adjust a few things, and then we actually ended up dropping one item from our class. Our class actually has a end of the week student presentation where they present as a team what they've learned in their mentor tracks. And we felt that that was going to be a little bit difficult for them to be able as a group to create that presentation and then turn around and present that part of it. So we did take that piece out of the class. But everything else we were able to adjust slightly or you know, work with to be able to work, make it work in a remote environment. The guest speakers did need to have a little bit of introduction on how to use the events version of BlueJeans, because they were very familiar with the regular BlueJeans, but the events version is slightly different and has a slightly different setup. Now, once we looked at all the material and everything, really the next big thing we had to think about was truly the user experience, the attendee experience. So when you are on a remote environment, it's completely different than an instructor-led classroom. When you come to the classroom, you are pretty much committed to be in that classroom. There's less distractions and you're more engaged. You're going to voice questions and things like that. So how do we do that in a remote world? We had to look at how we could use some of the tooling that was there. And I mentioned we did use polls. We used the chat. We made sure that there are plenty of breaks. That's one thing with a remote environment. You have to make sure you're giving them plenty of opportunity to break and get up and move. The captioning that I'm using right now was another feature that we turned on, which has helped quite a bit with attention. For a lot of people, listening is not the best way for them to learn something. Reading is much better for them to focus and pay attention. So the captioning was a nice piece of this. And we also had to look at, sharing materials and sharing slides and things like that. So making sure that they had the stuff ahead of time. So for some people, going through the slides with you on another screen is also very helpful for them. Now, part of the experience of coming to the classroom is also getting that belonging feeling, right? You come, you're all in this together. So how do we incorporate that in a remote environment? And we really tried to do that through our hands-on part of this. So in our hands-on class, we have 8 different breakout sessions, and they're role-based. So you would sign up to take one of the breakout sessions. And for those sessions, we switched from BlueJeans events to a regular BlueJeans or a regular Zoom. It's a smaller group. And in those sessions, we requested that you turn on your video and your audio so that everybody can see each other. And that way you guys, they could meet each other and they could actually participate and get that belongingness, get that feeling of, oh, I'm all here, and here, look at all these other people that are here with me. And I can now meet new people that I might be able to ask questions of and go through the journey together. So that was one of the things that we did to try to help them feel more belonging. The other thing we did is we set up several different Slack channels so that people, even after the class, are still using these Slack channels to be able to communicate with each other and with us to ask questions and to find information. So we also set up separate Slack channels for a lot of this so people could continue to communicate. And then the final part of this experience was the equipment. Like Rajon was mentioning, there was a big delay on receiving your laptop. And once you received your laptop, it wasn't fully set up. You had to make an appointment with the IT group to continue the setup or to finish the setup. So it was really difficult for us to figure out how to troubleshoot issues when we weren't in the room. So we sent checklists and we sent instructions ahead of class to all these people to make sure, check these things and make sure these things are working. If not, reach out to IT. But even with all that, we still had issues that came up during class that we had to try to troubleshoot. So, we had a couple side channels that we created where people could post issues and we worked with them on the side to be able to go with that. So these were a lot of the things that we had to take into account. And as we started to look everything and we rolled it all out, we were pretty excited on our first run. And again, we did all this within a couple days. Literally, we got this notification on the middle of the week, and we had to deliver this on the following Tuesday. So within a few days, we were able to make all these changes. And on our first run, we managed to get a 30 MPS. And our second run, we got a 60 MPS, which 60 is back up to our normal level for this particular class. And we had quite a few great comments for, the boot camp was great insight, and the mentors were helpful and nice and helped me, work with the group and get through everything. So it was really great to see that this was actually working. Now, as we moved through this whole process, we actually learned a couple of really good things. The first one was our mentors and our instructors were actually scared. They had not ever really done this before. And so it took a lot of hand holding to get them comfortable with using the tool, comfortable with presenting, comfortable with doing all those pieces and parts. So that was one of the biggest things, was just making sure that our instructors and our mentors and the guest speakers were all comfortable with doing this. Choosing the right delivery tool was another factor. Right now we're using Blue Jeans Events, and honestly, there is a lot of overhead with that. So we are looking at other tools like Zoom and Teams to see if it'll be less of an overhead. But for us, the learning curve on Blue Jeans, we were already there. So the learning curve was very small. So it was easy for us to jump into that part. Equipment delays meant schedule changes for us. So we basically were pushing people out to come to different classes and things like that. So that did do that. And communication was key, making sure the hiring managers knew and the leaders knew what was going on, made this really easy for us to do this transition by everybody knowing what's happening. So communication was important. Group bonding, takes a lot of work. Even with the things that we've put in place, it is still one of the parts that's the biggest lack in this remote delivery, is this group bonding and the feeling of belonging and the meeting and camaraderie. That part is really working, is really a part that we still need to continue to work on, I should say. The ILT material is not enough. You can't just flip an ILT into remote. You really have to look at your material and see how you need to adjust things. We broke it up into smaller chunks. We ended up taking bigger breaks. We ended up adding in more resources. So more supporting resources for people to use after the class. So there's a lot of that type of stuff that was changed. And I think that one of the biggest things that we learned was that the students need to take responsibility. We've had we've had several reports of, the students went through the class but didn't learn everything like they would have learned if they had come to a live class. And part of that is setting the expectation at the very beginning of the class that you need to be here and you need to be present and you need to be paying attention. And once we started setting that expectation, then people were being more responsible and focusing on the material and what was being delivered, as opposed to being distracted, because you're online, there's so many things that can distract you. And so, it's right there. Whereas if in your classroom, there's not as many distractions that come in, right? So just making sure that people are aware that it's their responsibility to take, to be present and be part of the class, and setting that at the beginning of the class actually helped us quite a bit. All right. Now we've managed to do full adoption on this, and I'm going to go ahead and let Rajon talk about how this is rolled out to not just Bootcamp, but to all of our training classes.
So, sorry, you can't see me. First experience us a lot. We learned a lot of lessons, and we were able to apply what we learned to all of the other boot camps and classes that we've taught up till now. So since then, we delivered 7 boot camps remotely, both in headquarters and in India. We maintained an incredibly high NPS, and we've onboarded so far 157 engineers. We've also delivered 12 remote classes, also maintaining a high NPS of 30, and we've taught about 300 attendants. So our remote classes are everything from learning our LinkedIn infrastructure all the way up to learning some AI and big data, such as Spark and Hadoop. one huge surprise was that our tech talks reached a significantly large attendance number, more than it ever did in the past. So, our tech talks have cumulatively gained an attendance of over 2,500 engineers. Most likely, our best guess is that because everyone's working from home and just looking at their laptops all day, they want to feel connected with their other colleagues and peers. So that's probably why our Tech Talks has grown so much in the past few months. And in addition, people have been learning more on our learning platform, LinkedIn Learning. So our custom courses that our team developed has increased 30%. So going on to our last slide, that's our story of how we fully adopted to a remote first learning environment. And we were able to do that while maintaining high response of NPS and other metrics, increasing our online attendance. And we're going, next steps is once things return back to normal, see how we can enable those that only join remotely to join in our in-person classes, or even lead with a remote first mentality. So right now, open to questions and conversations.
Cool, thank you. Am I, okay, you can hear me, yeah. Thanks, John, thanks, Sandi. This is awesome. I think I have a bunch of questions. There's one question from Andrew in the meantime, and let's just do that one since we're slightly over time. Andrew is asking, how do you deal with the employees that are distracted with everything else going on at home when it comes to learning, especially learning over multiple days and onboarding and so on. So how did you deal with things such as kids and family members and other things that come up at home as distractions?
Yeah, I know one of the things that we've actually done is we have done recordings of all of this. And so along with getting the slides for all this, we've also included recordings of all this information so that it can be watched at off times. Because yeah, we do have people who are onboarding that have kids in situations at home that are not lending to, being on a virtual system, all day long. The other thing is, again, communication with managers. And so there are some people who are, waiting a little bit longer before they take the boot camp, or who are, coming for a piece of it one time and coming for another piece of it the next time. So it's, again, communication with your manager and adjusting and being flexible. But the recordings help quite a bit with that.
Cool. Thank you. And I'll ask more questions maybe in a Q&A afterwards, but I'm super curious if there are any secret sauce to going from 30 to 60 NPS in like a matter of days, which is remarkable. And another thing that, so we can leave that for later. Another thing that I love is this idea of training incident management, right? We have that in engineering. We have our SAB 1, 2, 3. We know how to deal with incidents, but having that in training is new, and that's probably what enabled you to flip on a dime so quickly and implement this. So kudos to you. Thank you so much.